You know, I was thinking today, I was going for a swim and I was thinking about you, and I was thinking the last time that I saw you in the flesh was in India, right?
Oh my, yeah, 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 yeah. I, I think that was really an interesting experience. It was really an interesting experience.
It was
Uh,
incredible.
and you know the funny thing about that I was thinking that when we see, I'll be a bit taller than you. But you're taller than I was. I'm like, oh man.
You're a,
Yeah.
you're a, you're a big guy though, man. You got good muscles, right? You're in great
I
shape.
tried to work out. I tried to work out.
Yeah.
But India was really interesting in terms of I enjoyed the food. I know you were quite um you didn't want to try everything, but I tried everything. I was ready to eat everything. But you were quite picky, so but yeah,
Yeah.
it was fun.
I traveled through, when I was younger, I traveled through India for 3 months. And I got really, really sick. So I'm very, very observant as to what I eat.
I mean, I actually loved everything. I loved the food. The people they were hospitable. And it was actually a business trip we
Yeah.
went for. I remember we were trying to do some transformation back then, and that trip was really fun. I did like 5 days, and you came for just 3 days or 2 days, I think.
Exactly. It's one of those interesting things. I always think about personal contact, right? And we live in a world that's everyone's saying remote, remote, remote. And I love working remote. I know you do as well. We can be self-sufficient, we can be self-regulating, but there's something about the relationship that you create when you connect with someone and you see them physically, right? Like I've got that photo. We have a photo. It's you, me, and the CTO. I think it was just before I hopped in a cab to leave, and I have that photo printed out on my wall in my farmhouse in Italy. Like I love it so much because it was so good to spend time with you.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was fun. Before that time, we had that series of meetings, videos, and it's just interesting what physical bond could do in terms of even accelerating the way we work. Um, just the physical connection makes conversations better,
Yeah, totally.
and it was better for us moving forward after that meeting. So
Yeah.
uh,
It was, outside of the fact of the nights that we went out and dancing and I got to see your moves.
yeah,
It was really productive, right?
yeah. You know, that night I have a video of you dancing.
Don't share it. I think your dance moves are a lot better than mine, mate. But it was a really fun night.
It was. That was my first time of experiencing. Actually, the trip to India was my first time to India, right? So everything for me in that period was a first, many first beautiful experiences. And that night was actually a first of the nightlife in India. And it was amazing. It was amazing. The people were fun.
It was a lot of
I
fun.
mean,
And I remember the team. So, for our listeners' benefit, we were, Tommy and I, we were in India. We were working for a bank, at the time prior to you became the chief of staff. And I want to talk about that role, but you were the portfolio management officer, you were the head of PMO. And our role was to really transform the back end infrastructure of that, of the bank, right? So we were there to drive cultural change, moving from, I guess, a traditional waterfall approach to, agile to DevOps. But what I found really interesting about that trip is often when you're going to a large institution like that bank to make change, people are very standoffish and they're scared to engage. But I think that night where we went out, and maybe it was helped by a few drinks with everyone and good music, but the like you said, you used the word hospitable. The team, and it was a big team. I think we were looking at 120 plus people that needed to go through that transformation. They're all very hospitable and welcoming to us, right?
yeah, I mean, it was, before. and this is typical with every form of transformation, every change. There is usually resistance, because then the change in itself means dumping old ways, coming to moving to a newer model of doing things. And this particular team had encountered some resistance, right, in this transformation. I mean, just normal work stuff. But that night in particular made things better. It made engagement, interaction smoother, right? So yeah, I think, and take that was a key takeaway for me, in terms of like, part of your change transformation should be the physical interactions, the bonding, building
Exactly.
trust within the team. And I think that was what that event actually helped to do. I mean, we were out till, I think, 2 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m.,
I,
dancing to songs that I've never heard before.
I think I think I took a half day the next day. It was pretty intense.
The next day, I was to go to Chandigarh, I believe, and I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it. I couldn't. But yeah,
Yeah.
interesting time.
Yeah,
Interesting
it
time.
was interesting times. And, you know, when you do those things in person, it's what you hear and it is providing you're there to listen, right? It's what you hear that helps you the most. And I was thinking, you know, I think it was probably took another 8 or 9 months after that time where we were both in India, you know, starting the digital transformation for this bank. That was the kind of, we were starting it. There was a new CTO, some new team members, and you were really the driving force behind that. But it took about 8 months. After about 8 months, I took the CEO role, right? And then you moved, thankfully, into the chief of staff role. And, you know, I have to say, you are categorically and no offense to our listeners who have worked with me, you are the best person I've ever worked with, the most effective person. But it took, after 8 months and I became the chief executive, the one thing that I took away from that night out, outside of all of the transformation and the work that we did, was the constant comments from the team around their challenges with traffic and how long it took them. And I know that you have these issues in Lagos, right? But how long it took them to get to the office. And the average was around about an hour and a half each, one way to get to the office and another hour and a half back. And so, some of them were, you know, driving 2-3 hours in and out. So that's 6 hours worth of traffic. And the one thing that I picked up was, outside of the task at hand, was just how difficult the traffic was in Delhi. And how, if we just opened one small satellite office, it would have a big impact. And it actually took 8 months and to be able to get the CEO role and to then make that. That was the first thing that I did. And it immediately changed. Not only did it show that the business was listening to the team, but it also increased productivity as well.
Exactly, exactly. And you know, at the time we were even thinking of that, this it wasn't as though, and I think it's testament to also your leadership and just empathy, right? Because this wasn't even, when we were in India, it was just from a random conversation, right? That people just mentioned, oh, it takes X hours, most of the team coming from far areas to the office, and you just took it up. You know, when you mentioned that we're going to have offsite remote, I was thinking, are you just giving promises here? Like, is it actually going to happen? Right. But, seeing months after you keeping to what you had promised, what you had stated, even helped build trust with the team. And when you became CEO, it became clear that this guy is someone whose words can actually be trusted, someone who we can hold his words as assurance to
Mm.
deliver.
But
Yeah, that's testimony.
well, that's nice of you to say, Matt. But being a C-suite as well, and us working together as an executive team, there's one thing keeping your promise, but there's the other thing having all of the facilities to You can make a promise, you can intend to keep it, but you can't always execute on that promise as well. And I think that that's a really big challenge when you're working in a complex business like, you know, financial services as well. One person, one man, one woman, they don't make you can make the promise, but often there are a number of other factors that either crop up later in the piece when the promise is being executed, or there are other forces that are pushing against that as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally, and the fine skill is no. I remember you constantly said this, that know the things you could impact, know the things within your control,
Mm-hmm.
and know what's out of your control, and give 100% to the things you can control. I
Mm.
mean, that was like strategy for us. Okay, what is outside our control? What's within our control? Let's give 100% to the things we could change,
Mm.
and we really saw a good outcome from
Yeah.
just that mindset.
You're very, very good at that as well, Tommy. And I think that the word that when we worked together we used to use was triage, right? And triage being, you know, like if you go to the hospital, right? And there's three people. One has had their leg cut off, one has a cold, and one has a broken arm. The triage point is that you treat the person who's had their leg cut off first, otherwise they're going to bleed to death, right? And I think in business, one thing I noticed and why it was so great to work with you, and in such a high stress environment, you were very, very calm, right? A hell of a lot calmer than me. You managed to triage things, and you can put further to what you were saying about how I approach it, you manage to put things in the right bucket. And when, you know, again, the metaphor of the three people, the person who has the cold, you don't worry about the person who has the cold. You put them aside, you put them in a different bucket, and you focus on the things at hand. And a lot of executive, in my opinion, really struggle with that. And actually what they tend to do is they tend to want to treat the person who has the cold because it's an easy fix. They don't actually look at the more difficult challenges.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree with that. I mean, that was it. That was a time. That was a time. Interesting times. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're still based in Lagos, right?
Yes, I'm in Lagos. I'm in Lagos.
What's life like in Lagos now? And I'd be interested in, you know, what was life like when you grew up there? Because, you know, I think I've been there three, maybe four times, and that I'm never going to have an accurate an accurate perception of what Lagos is like because of how the cotton wool they put around me in the times that I went to Nigeria. But from your perspective, I know when I finished up at the bank, there was a lot of challenges. I think there'd been an election. There was a lot of challenges with diesel just to be able to, you know, run a generator or even petrol to be able to get to the office was really challenging. From your perspective, what's it like to live in Lagos? What's it like to live in Nigeria? And you know, what are the good things and what are the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, I would say, and thanks for that. Let me go down memory lane. But I think when I think of Nigerian people, one word that comes to mind is just resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because Nigerians are resilient
Mm-hmm.
people, right? In terms of a lot of things that say in other developed countries are not available in Nigeria, but the people are so resilient that it doesn't. This is no longer a problem. Okay, what's the way around it? And that's how everyone thinks. They in Lagos they call it the hustle, right? It's
What was
just the
that?
hustle.
The say it again.
The hustle,
Osu.
yes,
Okay.
hustle, like yeah, hustling,
Oh, the
right?
hustle. The hustle. Okay, I like it.
The word is the hustle,
Mm.
right? Because everyone is practically fending for themselves. Um, you supply your own light. Yes, there is power, but you have your own failover plan for when government's electricity power supply is down, which is every day, right? you source your own water. Yeah, so you have to make your own boreholes. Like everything you're thinking about, life in Nigeria is about you making a path for yourself because there's literally nobody that is paving that for you, right? And when you bring that into business, it's the same energy, it's the same approach. Like doing business in Nigeria is different, totally different from doing business any other way else, right? In short, like part of the transformation we handled at the bank we worked was trying to get people, and we had a wide team. We had team members in Nigeria, in Dubai, in India at the time, and it was a large team, total size of I think about 300 at the time. And part of that context was trying to get everyone that worked in different areas to see Nigeria is a different ball game, right? Those ideas, those strategies, it may work somewhere else, but I mean, in Nigeria, there is a different approach. There are more pertinent ways that we need to deal with our own issues, and that was part of the context that you brought in to say, let's hear from source, let's hear from people on ground in terms of building strategy. We're not bringing strategy from somewhere outside some foreign land and getting, but using the people who are on the road facing the hustle, um, getting feedback from them, and then working out a strategy. Right. So Nigeria is interesting. I mean, personally, for me, I grew up in an area called
Yaba.
Yaba in Nigeria, and there it was kind of middle income to low income environment, right? So you had to you had to do a lot of learning in terms of how does it work in advanced countries. Yeah, I had to get mentors. I had to get coaches that how does this thing actually work, right? Like, okay, I don't want to be mediocre, be a local talent, right? But if I'm going to be global, I need to understand how it works globally
Exactly.
and mix that with my local content. And really that's for me, that's how I approach life in terms of just understanding global context. I already have local context, and I can build strategy with that. Yeah, but, I think we could get into more of that, and I have some interesting stories on this matter of resilience. In fact, let me tell one of it, if we have time.
We have all the time in the world, mate. That's why we're here.
You know, there was resilience, right? Resilience, still resilience. I want to tell my own part of the story. I think when this was better than me, or when I got exposed to the fact that men, I have to take bold steps, was when I was about to get married. This was sometime in 2016, and I was saving up for my marriage. Um, I just got a new job at the time, and my boss then had mentioned to me we had some agreements. After 3 months, some agreements were to be in place in terms of offerings and all. And 3 months came, and she kind of reneged on uh, regular employee employer. This is not what I said. This is what I said. And I was like, if I choose to stay, it means I'm going to be accepting this manner of treatment for
Exactly.
the long run, right? And if I choose to leave, what's gonna happen? Like, I don't have another job, no other source of income. I just moved out of my parents' place. And that night, I spoke to my fiance at the time. I told her that this is the decision I'm making. I'm I'm going to leave, right? I would have a conversation with her and leave. And that night, I would say that was the birth of who I became,
Mm.
because I was faced with the fact that no one is going to help me. Like literally the next day I'm out of a job that I wasn't sacked from. I'm moving away from it in the hope that I would get something better. And that night, what I did was I went on LinkedIn and sent out 50 plus cold call emails
Wow.
to people telling them, oh, this is my talent, these are my skills, this is what I can add to your organization, looking for an opportunity to chat, blah, blah, blah. And I wouldn't have done that if I was in this comfort zone. And in a month, exactly a month from the time I left, I got an offer that was 2 times better than what I was asking to be, what I was trying to renegotiate for with my former job. Right. So I got something 2 times better than that. And it just opened my mind to, you can't stay in your comfort zone, right? You have to, if you want to do something impactful, you need to come out of your comfort zone. You need to take the bull by the horn. No one is going to save you. You need to like go out yourself. And for me, that's my resilience story. From that day up until now, there is nobody I can't have a conversation with in terms of selling ideas. I've built a product. I need investors. Like, what's the worst that can happen? A no, right? What's the worst that would happen? You fail, right? And you learn from it and you proceed, right? So I would say that's the life-changing experience in terms of my own career path,
Mm.
and sort of my story in Nigeria. Yeah.
No, it's a beautiful story, Tommy. And you're one of the in fact, I can't think of anyone who's transitioned so effectively, so quickly from what is effectively I'm not going to say middle management role, but you're a head of, right, with leading the portfolio management of a full enterprise transformation to a C-suite role, and moving into the chief of staff, and how quickly you did that, and how you didn't question yourself. You took that role. You put the C is a big, it's a big letter, because you are beginning to now become a lot more closer to investors, to shareholders, to the executive, to the board, and the demands and the subtleties of the business change. You become more responsible for the profit and loss of the business, the overall performance, and you did that immaculately. And I think that story that you told around resilience it's a great example of, you had that. Not only did you have a great partner that supported you, which I think is that's a whole other story, right? And I think I look at Zara, my wife, it's exactly the same. We can have these discussions and it's like, I'm not getting treated right. And I can't say what she'd say because it would have lots of expletives, but she would say, well, you need to get out them because they should be treating you better. And having a partner who is right next to you, who is giving you that support and who has the confidence in you that you equally have in yourself is really important. And I saw that with you as well, because you had a lot of challenges making that transition, a lot of questions making that transition into the C-suite. You're a young guy, you're flamboyant, you're passionate. And I think that's that's a great transition that you made. It was very, very impressive.
Thank you so much. And also, like, I can't, part of part of what I said was having mentors and coaches, right? Me transitioning at the point from head of portfolio project management to C-suite was solely, and I missed other things, because I had a good coach. And in this instance, it was yourself, because I remember funny enough, it was at India, the Indian trip, that you had mentioned to me that this and this is going to happen. maybe you should consider what it would look like stepping into a C-suite role. And this was like, I think 8 months before. And in my head, I was thinking, what are we discussing here? Like, how is this going to happen? Right? It wasn't even something that I could maybe aspire to get. It was more, it was more, I don't think you have the right person for this. But you constantly said, guy, you have global talent, you rock star, you know. And then I began to believe that, maybe I can actually do this. Right?
Exactly.
Maybe I can actually do it. Right.
Yeah.
And when the time came, like, you were still there to guide. And yeah, I think also the part of coaching was a big part into stepping into those shoes.
Yeah, I want to take that a little bit further, because bringing it back to resilience, right, and also self-belief. I'd be interested in your view on the cultural guardrails that are in Nigeria, right? And I'll explain what I mean in a moment. But the things that keep you where you are, right? And what I mean by that, it's like you are highly talented, global talent, without a doubt. Without it, I mean, I've worked in China, I've worked in the US, I've worked in the UAE, I've worked in Australasia, I've worked in the UK, blah, blah, blah. I could keep on going on. But you are right up there as far as global talent. And I'm not just saying that because we're on a podcast, right? But I want to make a point. But how do you, so here's the question, but I have something more to say, as I always do, to waffle on. How do you expose that global talent in Nigeria when there are these guardrails often to restrict you? And I'll use some simple examples, right? I'll use one simple example. When you went to China for the business, you went to India, just getting a visa to go to those countries was an absolute nightmare for you. I think in one instance, you had to go to Abuja, which is the capital of Nigeria. So there's these constraints that keep you from being who you should be. And I'll use a couple of other examples, right? You know that I've got a place in Italy and I've lived in New Zealand, and you use two examples. New Zealand, there's very few guardrails there. They want you to succeed to a point. Then they have the system that they talk about. It's called tall poppy, which means that if you flower to a certain point, they want to cut your head off. So there's guardrails so you don't succeed too much. It's an egalitarian country. There's a safety net for people who underperform. So it's all about normality. It's all about equality, right? Which, good or bad, that's not my point. Italy, there's things like limited connectivity in rural areas that stop rural villages from thriving, and there's certain mindsets that restrict you from succeeding. There's very little financial literacy in certain areas of Italy. And so it restricts you from, say, access to things like digital wealth management or digital banking tools or what have you. And I know you have those issues in Nigeria as well. So I just wanted to give some examples. But coming back to Nigeria, what do you think are these kind of physical and cultural guardrails that stop the growth of individuals and potentially restrict the country as well? And also, how does someone like you, who is right at the top of their talent, who is global talent, how do you deal with that, and how do you punch through those restrictions?
Yeah, thanks. I think that is a loaded question, right?
And intentionally, but not. Like it's not. I mean, again, because I actually don't know. My exposure was, limited on the ground, but I actually don't know what the answer is going to be. But I know that there are some restrictions, right?
Yeah. I mean, first thing I'd like to say is, in Nigeria, the opportunity is massive. right? I think it's been said multiple times that where there is a problem, then there is an opportunity, right? The land filled with so many problems is also a land equally filled with so many opportunities.
So true.
Yeah. So in Nigeria, the opportunity is immense, right? So that being said, however, there is an ecosystem that doesn't fully allow these opportunities be equally shared to everyone. So in Nigeria, talent is not enough in most cases. You need to understand the system at which you're working with. You need to understand there are many other factors that come into play in Nigeria. For one, networking is a major thing in Nigeria, right? In relationships is a major thing in Nigeria. And, you know, we also encountered some of these issues as well when we work, because yes, you have a template they want to do XYZ, and we have a solution to give, or I have a talent, I think I should get the best opportunities. There is also the part of understanding how to navigate the system. Relationships, it's one major part, right? And that part seems to keep that is the unequal factor that leads a lot of people. And this shouldn't be the case, right? It shouldn't be the case. Like, if you have the talent, you should be able to get the best opportunities. If you have the ideas, you should get the funding, right? So this is one major factor. You you may have known, right? In news, there is a huge tag on Nigeria as a nation with like one of the highest corruption indices, right? And this is seen everywhere, from at every level. However, understanding how to navigate it, there's also the part of being ethical in your approach. And for me, how I've been able to navigate this whole system is building capacity, building relationships, um, and such that when you get into a room, you have the right relationships, um, you have the right set of skills for the job, right? This is just where we work in. Like, even at now, I remember am I yeah, even that bank we worked with, yeah. I remember the first engagement we had. Like, you at the point said, I want to work with you. And at the time I was thinking that, could it be this easy to just strike a connection with someone from your first conversation, right? And I think one of the things that played out for me was the fact that, oh, you recognize skill sets, and then you were someone in the room that could say, I want to work with you, right? And it happens everywhere else, right? So putting your best foot forward is what I would say in terms of having this set of skills, right? Understanding the system, and no decision makers, right? Which in project management we call stakeholder analysis, right? Understanding the stakeholders that are powerful, influential, that have interest and low interest in whatever you're trying to do, right? So that comes to play heavily in a system where there isn't so much structure. There isn't a structure as to, do this in 3 years, you're going to be here. Do this in 4 years, you're going to be here, right? You need to just have a fine blend of both your interpersonal skills, and your core technical skills as well.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's a great overview, and that's at an individual level, and it's interesting. I want to talk about AI in a minute and the disruption that may or may not cause in Nigeria, but I just want to take what you were saying around the challenges in Nigeria I have an observation in my time working in Africa and some similarities to my time working in China. So I was working in China 2016, 2017, 2018, and raising capital for a Chinese company and traveling a lot to Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing. You were in Shenzhen recently, right? Was it Shenzhen? Fuzhou, yeah. So I was spending a lot of time in China and also raising capital from Australasia, so Australia, New Zealand, to a lesser degree Singapore. And what I witnessed at that time is very similar to what I witnessed it's changed for China, but I witnessed it in Africa because, as you know, for the bank, we were capital raising as well. I was having conversations, was in London, I was in Singapore, obviously the GCC, so Saudi and the UAE around raising capital. And what I noticed is how would I put this? What I noticed in China was very similar for what I noticed in Nigeria, and I'll call it institutional xenophobia, bordering on institutional racism. And I say racism with it's a very powerful word. It's a very powerful word, but I would almost say institutional stereotyping, because I don't think it's racism with intent. It's more just profiling and stereotyping, and then xenophobia. And the definition of xenophobia is, the fear of the unknown. And I want to kind of link these parts, because I witnessed it when I was working in China, and there's a lot of xenophobia and just racism in Australia and New Zealand towards China. There's certainly, it's changed a lot, but it was like that in 2016, 2017. And I really struggled with it being in the middle there of trying to translate a Chinese business, or effectively a business operating in China, trying to translate that and get that through to raise capital in Australasia. And I noticed that with, working for an African company as well. And I wonder just before we get to the AI piece, to a question to you, Tomi. You've talked about the challenges for an individual operating in Nigeria and punching through and shining. How does the country and businesses in Nigerian businesses, or even you could draw it out to a lot of African businesses, Kenya as an example, and the challenges that they face, how do they get through that institutional xenophobia, stereotyping, to raise capital, to be perceived as high quality businesses, high quality countries that can have impact?
I mean, I think that's an interesting one, and I'll still circle back to what I said earlier, that everybody can see that Nigeria is a land full with opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Even in recent times, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a company called Andela, they had started training engineers, software engineers, and shipping those talents across the world. And many other businesses with this same type of model are doing the same thing. And not just engineers, but just technically skilled people, IT skills and all the likes. Now, it's because everyone can recognize that there is something actually happening here. Less than 70% up to 70% of our population is below the age of 40.
Mm-hmm.
A youthful age. Like that's like it's nowhere else. Like in China, for instance, most of the populations, higher percentage are
Exactly.
elderly, right? Nigeria, it's completely the opposite. So everyone can recognize that this is the only spot, right? Now, in terms of attracting capital, the fear of fear of most investors has been not understanding. First, there is the economical factors, right? Inflation has skyrocketed
Mm-hmm.
in the last. It's always been on the high, but say in the last 3 years, it's gone up exceedingly,
Mm-hmm.
above 10%.
Mm-hmm.
That's inflation, and right now, or earlier this year, it was at the highest, right? So anybody bringing money into the country is going to be fearful of, oh, how am I going to get my capital back? How am I going to get return for my money, especially with the volatility of currency, the USD to NG and Naira and NG to USD, very volatile. It could move by 10 Naira in the space of an hour.
Mm-hmm.
That volatile. And when you do the trend over a year, you're thinking this may not favor me, right? So there are economical factors. For most investors are looking at, they can't see what's under the hood in most businesses, right? So there's the point of transparency, understanding the business models, um, founders being able to show clearly, transparently what how they are using funds, how investors should expect returns on their money, and just also businesses doing the work in terms of being financially accountable, right? There's also that gap, and most investors have learned over the years. Before now, 5 years ago, you could pitch with just an idea, right? You could pitch with just an idea on paper, on PowerPoint, and you get fundings, right? But right now, um, many investors want to know, what is the route to get money back? Show me your revenue lines. And I'll bring this back to the bank where we worked, because we were actually running on this same idea of just showing transactional growth and not actually showing revenue,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you joined in and you said, no, the strategy is changing. Um, One thing we need to begin doing is to show revenue growth, right? This is what investors want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pivotal moment at the bank, right? Because then it changed the way we were working. We were not just working to build transactional growth, but now, if it didn't make income sense, then we're not doing it, right? And if every business had this idea to not just work on shiny things, but actually be able to show where is the income going to come from, um, it makes the conversation easier.
Mm-hmm.
But does this change the fact that Nigeria is a land filled with opportunities? It doesn't, right? But there are things that we could do as businesses, as founders, to just make that, to attract capital, and this is one of it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% around it is the land of opportunity, but and where there's the opportunities are built off the back of problems and challenges that need to be solved. And that, just to kind of paraphrase what you were saying, if companies can become more financially transparent, be more operationally transparent, I think that would, I don't think it mitigates the risk. It doesn't remove the risk of investing into Nigeria. But what it does is it at least lets investors quantify the risk. And when you can quantify the risk, you can then take an educated approach. And I think that certainly trying to raise capital for a Nigerian company is, like you said, one of the biggest challenges is the Naira, which is the local currency, and inflation, and how do you balance investing in your company with managing operational costs as well. I just want to sort of pivot a little bit, because this is quite relevant. you talked about net transactional revenue, right? Being important for a company. I've always been a firm believer for that. I don't think it's always the most important metric, especially early on, but certainly when you're a mature business, you need the difference between what things cost and the amount of money that you make from whatever the transaction is. You need to have a difference. You need to be making money, right? And so let's kind of take that and extrapolate it to what's happening with artificial intelligence. And I'm not talking about AI because it's trendy and it's fashionable and, you know, everyone's talking about AI. I'm genuinely interested in the impact of AI in Nigeria, right? And there's kind of two parts to this, right? One is AI is, of course, an enabler. It's something that can, whether it's for the consumer or a business, it can make things faster, cheaper, better through automation. Effectively, that's what AI is you're just automating things. But then on the flip side, the disruption, right? So, you know, I think about a marketing team. I had a podcast recently with a lawyer, and I was asking him a very similar question around the impact of AI on law. And if I could wish for AI to impact one industry, it would be law, because it costs so much. And it's mathematical, it's data driven. And so we should disrupt law so that things can be done faster, cheaper, better. It's very cumbersome, right? And then if you look at, say, I don't know if you're following with OpenAI, what's happening with their new visualization tools, and everyone's posting it on LinkedIn. They're calling Ghiblification, you know, Ghibli photos and stuff like that, and rah, rah, rah. And effectively, what you're seeing there with the visualization models that they're running now that's open for free for anyone is you've just seen designers, graphic designers, the entire industry removed overnight, gone. You don't need a graphic designer anymore. It's gone. So what, if we use that as an example, say graphic designers gone overnight, lawyers hopefully soon, doctors, I'm being facetious, I love lawyers, right? Doctors, you know, certainly AI is proven that can do a better job than, say, your general practitioner, and that's on the horizon. Marketers out, it's a mathematical approach, cost per acquisition, cost per lead, you know, cost per conversion. What is the impact that that's going to have on Nigeria, firstly? And then to that, what is happening in Nigeria around accessibility to be able to work with AI, to be able to, because AI effectively can democratize. You were talking about the wealth gap, right? Or the opportunity gap in Nigeria. AI has the capacity to basically democratize that and level the playing field. What's your view on the impact of artificial intelligence in Nigeria, and what's actually happening in Nigeria and the region around either mitigating or leveraging off artificial intelligence?
I mean, I think that's another interesting subject. And usually the trend has been that Nigeria is usually, we could be tagged as late entrants, late
But that can be a good
adopters.
thing. Being a late entrant can be a good thing, because you skip, you can learn, and you can skip all of the mistakes that everyone else has made.
And usually we're late adopters as well. However, for this, the boom with AI, we've seen that the uptake is faster. You know, just yesterday, my wife showed me a picture of our mom's hairdresser, who just has she has a shop, like just a small kiosk. Maybe she would have like 10 to maybe maximum 10 people come to plait their hair there. So she's low income, right? She showed me a picture of her WhatsApp DP, and it was AI generated, an AI generated image that was on her DP. And we just had the conversation that, wow, everyone is using this technology.
Mm.
right? Everyone can see the benefits and adopt it early on, as opposed to maybe when Facebook came and many people didn't. Oh, what's Facebook? What's WhatsApp? Late adopters. But now everybody is jumping on it, right? So
Mm.
we see that a lot of people are embracing the technology, and we're already seeing the disruption in many areas. But Nigeria is still quite fragmented, right? Nigeria is still very much fragmented. As you know, we did business in Nigeria. Nigeria is still heavily cash dependent.
Mm. Mm.
Even though we have mobile technology, we have the best, one of the best interoperability in our banking systems today.
Mm.
But still, Nigeria is still very heavily cash dependent,
Mm.
right? So I see, I do not really see from my own point of view that the technology is going to cause a massive shift. For instance, um, um, if in the Western world, people are, oh, they are scared about graphic designers losing businesses. In Nigeria, many people still want to interact with someone and say, oh, I want my design this way. I
Okay.
want my design this way, right? And not just trust an engine to generate something. They want to interact with a person. And
Mm.
that is just culturally the case, right? Are we seeing more people using the tool, using AI to optimize their processes? Yes, they are. There are photographers who are using AI to edit their images today, right? However, people still love to call in Nigeria for. I'm talking
Mm.
about this space. They still love to call a photographer, pay the photographer to edit their pictures, right? To take their pictures and edit, right? But when we come to more sophisticated areas like in the financial sector, um, for instance, there is massive adoption, and as you know, Nigeria has invested even before now, before OpenAI and the buzz came. There was already a lot of robotics happening,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of automation happening with the banks. The banks were heavily invested in these tools, fraud monitoring tools, um, a lot of all of those. But now they are also open to, for instance, I've seen some banks that have incorporated full AI digital personalities managing their customer experience, their
Mm.
customer support, right? And they are fully embracing that, right? But is it totally going to disrupt the way business is done in Nigeria? The way I don't think it is going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years because Nigeria is heavily fragmented. Um,
Mm.
and I would also say this case, like for instance, in cryptocurrency, um, we see in USA, Trump is pushing for cryptocurrency, adoption
Mm.
of Bitcoin, and the likes. And congrats to you also, Lee, on your raise with your company and your coin. Um, but in Nigeria, the case is different. In short, the government says to banks that, oh, if they see any transaction with crypto in it,
Mm.
then they block the account and fine the banks, right?
Mm.
So the adoption is slower, right?
Mm.
But I do not see it crippling and collapsing industries in the nearest term. I think
Mm.
that journey is still far. There are more pertinent and real problems that we can solve in Nigeria, right? Even in terms of financial inclusion, right? There are many areas where in Nigeria people don't have access to internet, right? There are still over 40% of people that don't have smartphones, right? So in terms of bringing them into the market, bringing them into the pool of people that actually do financial transactions, have bank accounts, and are able to benefit from financial economy. There's still that gap, right? So it's AI is enabling, but I don't see it disrupting businesses and the economy in Nigeria in the
Mm.
nearest
Yeah,
10 years.
I agree with you completely. And I think when we look at AI, we really need to look in the next decade to 25 years. And that's, you know, that where we're really going to be seeing the major impacts, especially on the workforce. Interesting, you were talking about that, you know, the challenges of connectivity, of access to smartphones in Nigeria, because it's a bit of a dichotomy. On one side, you have limited access, but then on the other side, Nigeria can be very, very advanced. And, you know, I use the example of, it's actually kind of the Web3 and AI space. Nigerians are one of the biggest users of Telegram, right? So, you know, Telegram, Web3, there's the TON infrastructure, which is the sort of, you know, back-end blockchain. Telegram has close to 1 billion users. And, you know, there is a very strong component of Nigerian, Southeast Asian, Eastern European, all the way up through to, you know, ultra high net worth individuals using Telegram. And Telegram's is the very fertile ground for AI agents, which is basically automated bots that facilitate for everything. And one of the use cases that we see a lot happening in Nigeria is this sort of automated AI trading of tokens. You know, it can be meme coins, it can be, you know, some of the, you know, it can be Ethereum, it can be Bitcoin, any of the main sort of layer 1, layer 2, and kind of just normal token trading can be done on Telegram, and it can be all fully automated. And so I think that, you know, Nigerians have really adopted that because it's a way, even though it's not within the traditional financial ecosystem, it is a way to generate some form of wealth. The challenge is always getting it back into the traditional financial services system, and also, like you said, getting it back to cash. So in one way, there's the challenges, but to what you were saying before, resilience, Nigerians are very resilient. And, you know, I guess as we wrap up, I mean, sort of going full circle, right? We've talked about you, we've talked about how you pushed through those social barriers to become successful. We've talked about the local challenges. And there's one word that always jumps out to me with you, or one term, and that's, you know, we talked about it, global talent, right? Top tier global talent. What are your plans when you look at, you know, the next 5 to 6 years? You're a father now. How old is it's your son, right?
Yes, 8 months.
How old is 8 months? So you're a new father, you know, you're right at the top of your game. You've hit that C-suite level. You're, you know, a lot younger than I was a lot older. It took me a lot longer to get to a C-suite. You hit it young. You're, you know, top talent. What's the plan for Tomi for the next sort of 5 to 10 years for you and your family?
So when my son came, I had this moment where I'm thinking I want to get the best in terms of exposure. I think every father just wants to know my son can't go through the same pains that I went through, right? Even though behind my mind, I'm thinking of this quote on another podcast where I saw, and then someone said, strong men build strong economies, and their children then become weak and then build weak economies, and then that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to find the right balance. But anyway, I said that to say that for me, I want to just give my family that opportunity to experience that exposure from an early age, right? Have the opportunity. For me, I was limited in terms of traveling, going to places, just meeting until my teenage years before I could interact and say, "Oh, I didn't know this. I didn't know we could do this way." Um, so I want to get a. I'd like the opportunity to at least get my son a global access, right? Wherever I wants to school, move my family, relocation, maybe somewhere, something I'm considering, right?
Mm.
But not leaving Nigeria because Nigeria is where the opportunity is, right? So whatever opportunity I have at this point to just get them that ability to move around freely. Um, for my family, that's what I'm considering. Um, but personally, for me, I'm grinding here. Um, right now, I'm vice president operations at a cross-border payment organization, and the opportunities intense as well. Um, in terms of cross-border, there are many businesses that are unable to facilitate payments across board globally, make payouts to suppliers, businesses. And I think that's something I want to solve for. And I'm partnering with the guys I'm with now to solve for that problem. And it's something I really believe in. And just seeing how much we can conquer within the next 5 3 years. Right. So for me, I'm just grinding on. I'm currently running my MBA as well. And I started with your help and your coaching as well. So it talked me into doing that too. But yeah, I'm currently running my MBA and just continuing the work I'm doing here while looking for opportunities for my family to just have global access as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, look, I come from a family of immigrants, and I am an immigrant in many ways. So my dad moved from the northeast of England in the 1970s to New Zealand, and then to get a better life, and that was the area of opportunity then. And I moved from New Zealand to the UAE to want to have a better life as well. To go where the opportunities are. And I think it's a very noble quest as well. A noble quest to be able to not only match what your skill set is with where the demand is, and for you, high tech, hard skills, very strong hard skills, exceptional soft skills, and that capacity to be able to take those to another region for the benefit of your family, but be able to do that contextually with all of the knowledge that you have of your local country, your country of origin, and leverage off that knowledge either for the benefit of your home country or for the fact that to assist other companies to understand or to trade or to engage and to interact with your home country as well. And I think cross-border is a great example of that, right? Because contrary to popular belief, it's the best way to do cross-border business and financial services is to have people and teams who understand both sides of the coin. So if you're doing Chinese yuan to US dollars, you need a you need a US team and you need a Chinese team. If you don't have that, it's just setting up the rails is not enough. And I think that's a really noble thing that you're doing, Tomi. And I guess to wrap up, I mean, how are you finding the MBA? Like, you're almost a year into the course, yeah?
Yeah, interesting. And just to add to before getting into the MBA, for me, I'm not looking to leave or relocate, right? Um, I want to solve Nigeria's problems, right?
Mm.
And help businesses to solve those problems. Um, so that's really what the focus is. In terms of family, get them opportunities to move around freely. But I think I'm going to be here for the longest, solving Nigeria's problems.